Hey everyone, it's Mostly Casual Commander. I'm BK. We're on Discord and Patreon. Links are in the description. Today's game has Busterkins with his boy, the Dragon. He's going to reduce the cost of dragons and make dragons. I'm playing Edgar Markov, the first commander deck I ever got. I go wide with vampires, and then I make them tall. Matt is playing probably the most tribal deck ever, Sliver Overlord, making a million slivers. J-Man brought Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, to the table. He's going to go to Value Town by targeting his creatures with stuff and getting free copies. Stick around for an appearance from my Fat Cat Meatball. I like him. Busterkins plays Nomad Outpost on his turn and passes to me. I play a Swamp, followed by a Knight of the Ebon Legion. That dude could get pretty big. Eminence triggers off Edgar in the command zone, and I get a free vampire before passing the turn to Matt. He plays a tapped Stomping Ground as his land for turn. J-Man draws and plays a Forest as his land for turn, and then he casts a turn 1 Soul Ring. Extended art though, so it's better. Then he passes over to Busterkins. He plays a Mountain, and for some reason, that took me way too long to find that overlaid graphic for it. It was insane. He also casts Armillary Sphere, allowing him to ramp on a later turn. I play a Fetid Heath as my land, and I'm like, yo, vampires are cool, let's make more. I cast Legion Lieutenant, triggering Edgar Markov, and pumping my whole team with Legion Lieutenant on the battlefield. I then go to combat. I swing at Matt for 4 points of damage, and he takes that, which this will trigger Knight of the Ebon Legion on the end of my turn. On his turn, he plays an island as his land. Then he casts Venom Sliver. So his slivers all have Death Touch. That's how slivers work. Each one of his slivers is going to be like, yo, get some other really cool ability that everybody else wishes they had. J-Man dropped an island, and then he cast Dryad of the Elysian Grove. So he could play more lands, which he does now, by dropping Bark Channel Pathway onto the battlefield. This allows him to cast his commander, Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief, before passing the turn over to Busterkins. He'll draw, and then he'll play another Mountain as his land for turn, and his thirsty dragon deck could make use of a Commander Sphere. He says, go over to me. I draw and play a Mountain as my land for turn, and with that out, I cast Sorin, Imperious Bloodlord. He can make a vampire bigger, he can make a vampire turn into a Lightning Helix, or he can give me a free vampire from my hand. In this case, I Lightning Helix the Venom Sliver because I'm terrified of slivers. I moved into combat and again attack the guy with the slivers. So I drop Matt down to a smooth 29 on turn 3. My Knight of the Ebon Legion will trigger on my end step, and then on Matt's turn he plays a Breeding Pool, and he'll have it enter the battlefield tapped. Over to J-Man. He plays Gemrazor, the fancy one. This will target Dryad of the Elysian Grove on top, and because of that, he gets to get a free mutated Gemrazor on top of Ivy as well, represented with a copy token there. And with those hitting the battlefield, he'll blow up Busterkins' artifacts. Then he'll move to combat, killing my Sorin, because I did not see that coming. But I left him undefended, so I probably deserved that. On Busterkins' turn, he plays a Sandsteep Citadel and has to say go. He really needed those mana rocks, looks like. On to my turn, I play a Path of Ancestry. I consider not saying vampire, but then I say vampire. I move to combat at J-Man for killing my Sorin, and he decides to get cheeky by casting a Cerulean Wisps. He got to cast that using a forest thanks to Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Neat. So he'll target his Gemrazor Dryad, which of course makes a copy targeting Ivy. He'll get to draw 2 cards, and with his untapped creatures, he'll defend against my attackers. But in response to that, I activate Knight of the Ebon Legion and deal him a little bit of extra damage, which of course will also trigger Knight on my end step. I pass the turn to Matt. He draws and plays a Mountain as his land for turn, and then he casts Skyshroud Claim, getting 2 forest cards from his library and putting them into play. In this case, it's a Zagoth Triome and a Jetmir's Garden. So both those bad boys get him all the colors he needs. On to J-Man's turn, he plays a forest as his land. Then he'll cast a timely Findhorn Elves. Findhorn Elves? Findhorn? I don't know which one it is. And then he'll cast Frog Tongue. What do you mean you've never heard of that? It basically says give a creature reach, and you get to draw a card. And because he cast that on his Findhorn Elves, he also got one on Ivy, drawing him 2 cards instead. He then plays an island, thanks again to Dryad. And then he casts Blanchwood Armor, getting +1/+1 for each forest he controls, on both his Gemrazor and on his commander. He moves his creatures into the red zone, picking on me for no good reason. It's because he's a Rudy McBooty. He drops me down to 25, and then passes the turn over to Busterkins. He plays a Vivid Creek as his land, and then he casts Goldspan Dragon, probably one of my favorite cards. Then Matt said something polite to Busterkins, and he didn't like that.
You making fun of me, Matt?
Yeah.
For it. Got him.
Along the way, Goldspan said, yo, make a treasure. And then he passes the turn over to me. I play Sunbaked Canyon as my land, and then I go attacking at Matt, dealing him a little bit of damage before staring over at J-Man's board and deciding to cast Cleansing Nova. I destroy all the creatures on the board, all of them, especially J-Man's. And I mean, Goldspan is a pretty diabolical card too. So anyway, I pass the turn over to Matt. He plays Gal Rider Sliver. As a follow-up, he has Sliver Legion, which is great. All of his slivers can fly, and each one of them is an anthem effect for all the other slivers. On J-Man's turn, he plays a forest, and then he recasts his commander, because I mean, he's got to, right? The deck is built around it. And after that, he casts Kadama's Reach, getting 2 islands, one to the battlefield tapped, and the other one to his hand. On Busterkin's turn, he plays Opulent Palace, which entered tapped, and makes him sad because he has to say go. Over to me. I play a very timely Arcane Signet. Then I cast Nighthawk Scavenger, triggering Edgar, getting me a 1/1 as well as triggering Path of Ancestry, which is great because I get to scry a whole card, which I keep on top. We look through my opponent's graveyards and Nighthawk Scavenger says, yo, I'm a 6/3. On Matt's turn, he plays a Plains as his land, and then he casts Synapse Sliver, which says when your slivers deal damage, you get to draw cards, so he tries to do that by attacking J-Man and Busterkins. J-Man says, I could trade with your flying sliver guy with my commander by casting Snakeskin Veil and giving it a +1/+1. And that's what happens. So Ivy dies, Flying Sliver Dude dies, Matt draws a card because Legion still hit Busterkins, then he passes the turn. J-Man plays an island, then he casts a Seedboard Muse. So J-Man just gets all the mana because his land's untapped during everybody else's untapped step. Over to Busterkins, he draws and plays a Vivid Crag as his land, getting those charge counters on that bad boy. Then he casts Atarka World Render. Man, this guy just hands out double strike to dragons. He passes the turn over to me. I play Twilight Prophet. I really like that card too. It gets me a vampire. Then it says Ascend check, please. And I have 10 permanents on the battlefield, so I get the city's blessing. I also got a scry thanks to Path of Ancestry. I pass the turn to Matt, who plays Clot Sliver, which is gross. Then he casts Harmonic Sliver, which probably should have been the first thing he casts. And we talk about it after, because that's what heroes do. But he still blows up J-Man's Soul Ring, then moves to combat trying to draw some more cards and sling some more points of damage. So he gets to draw 2 after he connects with J-Man and Busterkins. He drops Zayatora's Proving Ground as his land for turn, and then passes over to J-Man. He recasts his commander, because again, that's what his deck is trying to do. He drops Simic Signet, and then he plays his land for turn. In this case, it's a Mystic Sanctuary. It, of course, enters the battlefield untapped, and it allows him to put a Cerulean Wisp back on top of his library from his graveyard. And with that, he passes the turn, untaps his lands when Busterkins does. Busterkins plays a command tower and moves to combat at Matt, dealing double striky damage right to his face and dropping him to 9. Growing concerned at his opponent's board states, he casts Deathbringer Regent. Attempting to wipe the board but keeping a 5/6 flyer on his side, Matt has something to say about it.
I'm gonna play Heroic Intervention.
Oh.
So, yeah, Matt cast Heroic Intervention, giving his stuff indestructible, and feels bad. Busterkins pass to me. I play Gifted Etherborn, getting a 1/1 from Edgar, as well as a Scry, which I move to the bottom of my library. I then cast Radiant Destiny. With City's Blessing online, my stuff is +1/+1 and Vigilance. Matt's turn, he drops the World Tree as his land, then he casts Diffusion Sliver. So now all of his slivers have Ward 2 in essence. This also blows up my Radiant Destiny because of Harmonic Sliver. He then casts Shifting Sliver. So now his stuff can't be blocked either. He blows up J-Man's Monorock, again thanks to Harmonic Sliver. Then he moves into combat, dealing a bunch of damage to J-Man and enough damage to Busterkins to knock him out of the game. Sorry, Busterkins. Well, Matt draws his 4 cards, and then he passes the turn over to J-Man. He draws, and then he recasts his commander, Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief. He sadly couldn't really do anything else of value that turn, so he passes over to me. I cast Vampire's Vengeance, because it's the only out that I have, in the form of the blood token it produces to allow me to draw another card. In response, J-Man casts Cerulean Wisps to also draw a card. After that, Ivy dies because of Vampire's Vengeance, dealing 2 damage to everything. I sack my blood token to discard a card and then draw a card. I unfortunately do not find the answer on top of my library, but I found a Dusk Legion Zealot, which gives me another vampire token and draws me 1 more card after I scry thanks to Path of Ancestry. However, even with 1 more card, I have no mana left, so I just move to combat, sending a message at Matt, dealing him 2 points of damage and gaining 2 life. I have to pass the turn. Matt drops a swamp. Swamp drop! And then he decides to cast his commander, Sliver Overlord, to lead his legion of slivers into battle, after, of course, he destroys my arcane signet. He then casts Blur Sliver, giving all of his slivers haste. He lines up his attacks, and he takes both of us out of the game at the same time, like a true gentleman and scholar. So, congratulations, Matt. Job well done on piloting and crafting a really cool sliver deck. That thing survived 2.5 board wipes and a kill spell. Here's your boy, Meatball. And look, here's Peanut. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this game featuring mostly tribal commanders. That was a lot of fun, and man, those slivers can get out of control really fast. Well, let us know what you thought about the game in the comments, and as always, thank you for watching.